You're listening to the Tony Kinnett Cast on 93 WYBC.
CYTV.
Here on the Daily Signal.
Good evening and welcome to the Tony Kinnett Cast here on the Daily Signal, nationally syndicated first on 93 WYBC. Well, Representative Jasmine Crockett has made the official super duper announcement. She's actually right now giving some kind of opening campaign rally whateverness. We'll get to that in a second. She's running for Senate, and she is out here making the weirdest campaign ad I think I've seen yet, and that's saying something. For those who are listening and won't be able to watch it, it was just Jasmine Crockett's face and Donald Trump talking about her. In essence, it's a weird daydream from Rosie O'Donnell, but with Jasmine Crockett. Here you go.
How about this new one they have, their new star, Crockett? How about her? She's the new star of the Democrat Party, Jasmine Crockett. They're in big trouble.
But you have this woman, Crockett. She's a very low IQ person.
I watched her speak the other day. She's definitely a low IQ person. Crockett. Oh, man, oh, man. She's a very low IQ person.
Somebody said the other day.
So to those who are listening, she has now gone from looking off to the side, a little side profile. Now she's facing the camera, her hair swept to the side, and whoever's doing the lighting, I don't think that you want to go for the clown balloon lighting aesthetic, but we'll let him finish here. This is a little short campaign announcement here.
He's one of the leaders of the party. I said, you got to be kidding.
Now they're going to rely on Crockett. Crockett's going to bring them back.
And she does an almost smile, and then it says Crockett for U.S. Senate, and then it's like black and white, kind of grainy, which I thought that she hated a time when America used kind of like black and white photography and grainy film footage, whatever.
Why did they decide to go with the same tone that they use for natural disaster relief fund commercials?
You almost need some Arms of the Angel, right? A little
like
music
one of those
behind it.
commercials that they use against drunk teen driving or distracted driving for text messages, where they play excerpts of phone calls.
It is really, really awkward. But
it's just so somber.
To be fair, in earnest, the worst part of this is obviously that she finished with Trump saying she's a low IQ person, and they just make that the banner. A low IQ person, Jasmine Crockett. Although again, having her speak means she then has to do that accent for the remainder of the campaign, which she is incapable of doing. Now, we actually do know what her campaign is going to be like. Some people have said, man, this is a mystery. They're trying to fresh face Kamala, the Jasmine Crockett campaign. It's time to take another look at Jasmine Crockett.
Yeah, is it going to be Brat?
Well, she has already told us in an interview from just under a month ago what she would, if running for Senate, make her entire campaign about. And it's the worst strategy I've ever seen, which means that it's exactly the thing for Jasmine Crockett.
I think that we're living in unprecedented times.
I'm waiting for someone to announce that we're living in precedented times.
You cannot live in precedented times since COVID.
It's like being couth. Like nobody's ever couth. They're uncouth. So we're in unprecedented times. Original, exciting.
And I think an unprecedented candidacy is what we need to do in Texas if we're going to do something different. And
so an unprecedented candidacy in Texas. Keep that in mind.
so I think when you're talking about how expensive these races are, starting with someone who is known and has a brand that doesn't take from anybody. I think being a fighter for the people is what people are looking for. I think one of the reasons you saw what happened in New York is because he said he was going to fight for the people that are forgotten, not the rich people, but the people that are barely making it by in one of the most expensive cities in this country.
She goes on to say that she's going to run this very celebrity-focused campaign where she gets out there and says, I want to view the people, like Bane. Only here's the problem with Texas specifically. Maybe if you were running that campaign in Indiana, maybe if you were running that campaign in Utah, maybe if you were running that campaign in South Carolina, that might work. The problem, however, is that she's doing this in Texas. Beto O'Rourke tried that and failed. And then he tried that again and he failed. I mean, he literally was like the white suburban moms were coming out, yay, it's Beto, and it didn't work. Collin Allred tried this and it didn't work. He lost to Ted Cruz, but he's a football star. Didn't matter. He's going to fight the billionaire. Didn't matter. He lost. Now, Collin Allred, who was also going to run again against John Cornyn, the Republican Texas senator who would be running for re-election next, Collin Allred, who ran against him, he's now announced he's no longer going to run for election. He's dropping out of the race before the primary even occurs. He says that he's going to run in the 33rd House District. So he put this out today. He said the 33rd District was racially gerrymandered by Trump in an effort to further rig our democracy. But it's also the community where I grew up attending public schools and watching my mom struggle to pay for our groceries. As a reminder, the Supreme Court of the United States has now ruled that there's nothing racial at all about Texas gerrymandering, about Texas redistricting, whatever you want to call it. And in fact, all Texas redistricting does is advance the state legislature's political priorities, which is what a state legislature has the constitutional authority to do. Now, here's the fun part. He openly admits that getting into a primary combat, contest with Jasmine Crockett would be, quote, bruising, which is really weird. So already you have Collin Allred just, bowing to Jasmine Crockett, out of the way. Best of luck to her. We do also have a rapper. That's right, because she probably can't rap like Zoran Mamdani can. So she has to get out there and get a man who knows how to do it. Because nothing is more feminist than getting a man to do what you can't do yourself. So here you go, the rapper for Crockett. This is her official campaign announcement event this evening, right before we went on air. Here you go.
Let's get into it. Okay, she ain't never scared and she ain't never been. Who is willing to go toe to toe against the president? I can't wrap my head around someone who
talent contest winner.
Okay, hold on a second here. I want to see if I can finish this at the right time here.
She ain't never scared and she ain't never been. Who is willing to go toe to toe against the president? I can't wrap my.
There you go. I can't rap. The rapper at Jasmine Crockett's official campaign announcement. Also, if you're going to drop a beat, drop a beat. That sounds like having a hangover feels. That's ridiculous. Anyway, we got to move on because there's so much news, so little time here. The real strategy of her campaign is going to be to call everything Nazi and authoritarian, because that's all she's ever said on camera, ever. She's never provided even a Democrat progressive plan of kind of socialist affordability, which an oxymoron, but it is what they push forward. She's never actually pushed a kind of Bill Clintonian union style policy. She's never pushed any policy forward on law enforcement, on immigration, nothing. She has just gone to Washington and fought in a very boring dry t-shirt wrestling contest with Marjorie Taylor Greene in the House subcommittee. That's it. The most boring thing on earth. That's all she's provided. And the authoritarianism angle, in case you were wondering, yeah, that is going to turn out to be Democrat strategy heading into 2026. So Vice President J.D. Vance is under fire today because he was accused of saying that it's totally reasonable to not want neighbors who speak another language. There's only one problem. Vance didn't say this. Spencer Hacking Sounds made this claim that Vice President Vance was running around saying that Americans don't want neighbors that don't speak English. That's really terrible and awful and evil. Here's what Vance actually said, however, which we have the video for.
Who's out of the house is actually evicted from the house because there are people who are going to pay more for rent. And then what happens is 20 people move into a 3-bedroom house. 20 people from a totally different culture, totally different ways of interacting. Again, we can respect their dignity while also being angry at the Biden administration for letting that situation happen and recognizing that their next door neighbors are going to say, well, wait a second, what is going on here? I don't know these people. They don't speak the same language that I do. And because there are 20 in the house next door, it's a little bit rowdier than it was when there was just a family of 4, a family of 5.
So that's what he made the point of, that there are a lot of Americans right now who don't want to live next to federally subsidized migrant housing because then you have nothing in common with your neighbors, and that's concerning to Americans.
Pretty reasonable.
That sounds pretty reasonable to me. He then went out on social media to say, quote, first of all, that's a made up quote, completely dishonest. I never said that it's totally reasonable to not want neighbors who speak another language. He said, second, what's reasonable is, to want to share a language with your neighbor. How do you borrow a cup of sugar? How do you resolve disagreements? How do you have a nice conversation? You need a common language. And in America, that language is English. The far left became so deranged on immigration that they're attacking people for wanting to be able to speak to their neighbors. And this has caused Stacey Abrams and Ketanji Brown Jackson and everyone to come out and scream authoritarianism and Nazi and racist, and it ain't flying. Radio crew, we got to send you over to the commercial. We're going to continue on the live stream. It's the Tony Kinnett Cast here on the Daily Signal. All right, live stream crew, you don't have to deal with an FCC communication required commercial this evening, so let's talk about Stacey Abrams. Now, she's been busy losing elections in Georgia and having a really awkward cameo as the president of Earth in Star Trek. But unlike, Lizzo, who actually took the time to get in shape, Stacey Abrams has taken the time to see shapes hallucinatingly. She has decided that she is now going to launch a 10 steps campaign. These will be the first 10
More
steps.
than she's ever done in exercising.
You beat me to it. That's to be the first 10 steps Stacey Abrams has taken to, quote, shine a light on President Trump's playbook to authoritarianism. Here's the video for this brilliant maneuver.
10 steps to autocracy. We've seen this playbook before, but we've also seen people rise up and stop it. That's the story I want us to tell. The threats, but also the fight. So let's walk through it together.
I'm so excited. It hasn't worked before, and it didn't work the time before that, and not even before then. And how do you know this, Tony? How do you know this hasn't worked before now? The Supreme Court of the United States is having oral arguments right now, today, over the President of the United States firing a member of the Federal Trade Commission, which is his Article 2 authority in the United States Constitution. They are a federal employee that works for an executive branch or commission. Therefore, he gets to do the firing and manage the general direction. Congress funds it and sets up the rules. Then the president runs the office. Now, here's where things get fun. There was a lot of arguing and bickering and all kinds of stuff. You had Justice Gorsuch just openly asking the attorney Amit Agarwal about how this whole thing was supposed to work today, and says, well, do you think that people who are in the employ of the president should listen to the president? And that's such an obvious answer for a lawyer in front of the Supreme Court arguing about the Constitution. The man fumbles his answer harder than Ohio State on Saturday.
So even some quintessentially executive functions, in your view, are not vested in the President of the United States?
Yeah, I would not say that. I would not put it in this. I would not say that. Yes, I would.
You man, I would not. Gorsuch is like, are you going to answer me or whistle Dixie?
Say they're not.
You have to say yes to that based on what you've just given.
They're not constitutionally committed to the person of the president and to his sole and exclusive discretion.
What a weird way to say, no, they don't follow the Article 2 authority. But to make me truly suffer, Ketanji Brown Jackson dragged out the Crayolas and started trying to understand things. This is what she does. She always goes, I'm just trying to understand. And then she takes the most basic fundamental framework of U.S. civics, throws it in a food processor, and then spits in it and hands it to the American people. Your equity hire Supreme Court justice, ladies and gentlemen.
I'm trying to understand why you think that Congress is somehow less democratically accountable for the way in which it constructs these agencies and determines the term of office of the officers. You seem to think that there's something about the president that requires him to control everything as a matter of democratic accountability, when on the other side we have Congress saying we'd like these particular agencies and officers to be independent of presidential control for the good of the people.
Do you have a comment, Nick? Because this is hurting me.
So one time there was this document that outlined 3 branches of government for a place called America. And then you were supposed to read that document and then you'd understand.
So Ketanji Brown Jackson is angry because she doesn't understand that the separation of powers in the U.S. Constitution gives Congress the ability to fund and to approve nominations for positions. And then the President of the United States can then direct that agency that has been funded and the laws are written for it, like the Federal Trade Commission, and then the president decides if they can be fired. She doesn't understand that balance of power. She has no idea. She thinks Congress gets to do whatever it wants with agencies, and the president can't touch it. The problem is the president is literally in charge of the executive branch. That's why he's called the chief executive.
We're exercising our Article 1 authority to protect the people.
And he's exercising his Article 2 authority. Case closed. We got to bring in Brandon Gill. Don't go anywhere. Big show tonight. It's the Tony Kinnett Cast here on the Daily Signal.
This is the Tony Kinnett Cast on 93 WIBC.
Representative Brandon Gill of Texas 26th, the guy who knows that if you're going to go ahead and get rid of Judge James Boasberg, then you might as well file an impeachment proceeding. Representative, thanks for joining us.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
I have one soft suggestion for the next maybe impeachment or censure. Ilhan Omar, thoughts? Removal, censure, what do you got?
You know, she deserves all of the above. I mean, this is somebody who goes out of her way every single day to bash the American people, to bash our country. This is a country that's been unbelievably generous to her and to her community, by the way. And she should be on the forefront right now, for instance, of speaking out against the enormous amount of welfare fraud in Minnesota that's been uncovered just in the past week. Estimates say that it could be as high as $8 billion. That is her community that is largely the culprit. And she should be the one who's speaking out against that type of fraud, who is condemning it. And yet she's been largely silent. So she's really a disgraceful congresswoman, somebody who should never have been elected. Candidly, it looks like that she's somebody who never should have been allowed into our country to begin with. But, you know, that's what we're up against now.
So one of the things that I was going to ask was if you think that some kind of an investigation into her past, into the kind of financial dealings that she's had. Again, my producer was pointing out to me today, she was heading out of Minneapolis pretty far out into other communities in Minnesota, right next door to random places that seem to be directly connected with various kinds of fraud. It's really suspicious. I just kind of get your take here. Do you think that we might see some kind of an investigation forthcoming at any point?
You know, I would like to see an investigation, specifically if she had a role in any of this. But, you know, the question to me is one of immigration, and we should be running investigations of this. We basically decided that we were going to import tens of thousands of people from a failed society, a place where Somalia, where where corruption and grift is the way that people interact with the federal government there, or the lack of government there. And whenever you import cultures where corruption is the norm, you should expect to see corruption in the United States, and that's exactly what we saw.
Well, that's what Stephen Miller of the White House, Deputy Chief of Staff, said in a sense. In essence, paraphrasing what you just said. And then Ilhan Omar called him a Nazi. I mean, do you feel rather Nazi-esque? Is it red armbands time? It's hard to keep track of what qualifies you to be a Nazi these days.
You know, it's crazy. Nazi is just a Democrat term for anything that they disagree with now. It's just like the term racist. It has no meaning anymore. They've overused it for so long. But we've got to accept basic truths, which is that not all cultures are equal. Not all cultures are morally equal. Not all cultures are equally compatible with our constitutional framework in the United States. Different cultures are compatible with different types of frameworks, and I think that we've seen that this corrupt, fraud-ridden Somalian culture is incompatible with our constitutional system of government in the United States.
So there are two different kind of Republican responses to this that I've seen, and I got to get your take because, again, most of the country views you as just a normal guy instead of in this for decades and all of that swampy nonsense. And this would basically, you've got Senator John Curtis, junior senator of Utah, and then you've got Vice President J.D. Vance, former senator of Ohio. And John Curtis made this statement, and I quote, "All of us need to wake up every morning, look in the mirror and say, what am I doing specifically today to make all of our immigrants feel more welcome," end quote. And then Vance, in response to a claim that he had said that he wanted a bunch of people kicked out if they didn't speak his language, said, why would Americans not want to speak the same language as their neighbors? I'd totally reasonable to suggest that we may, in fact, want to have neighbors next door that we'll buy a cup of sugar from, that we have a conversation with, that do, in fact, speak our own language in our community. Those seem like the two responses right now in the kind of Republican side of the aisle. What do you think?
You know, I think that members of Congress should wake up every morning asking ourselves, how can we make life better for the American people, American citizens, not people who came into our country illegally, or anybody else. For American citizens, those are the people that we represent. And that's a fundamental difference between the Republicans and the Democrats. If you hear Democrats talk about members of their community, who they represent, they always, as a matter of course, always include illegal aliens in that group that they represent. Those are core members of their communities and their constituencies by their own logic. And I think that we need to absolutely reject that as utter nonsense. But I think J.D. Vance, once again, is entirely correct, as he always is, in saying that we ought to place a premium on being able to communicate with our fellow countrymen. It is really important to be able to walk out your front door and know that your neighbors speak the same language as you do. You know, you can't have a culture, you cannot have basic civic bonds with your fellow countrymen if you can't even communicate with them. And if you don't have those basic civic bonds, you really don't have a country. You don't have anything that's really holding us together. And all of the things that we enjoy in the United States, a free market, a government that we hope is not corrupt, are predicated on having real serious cultural bonds. And one of those components, like I said, really is being able to communicate with each other. That is the most basic part of having a coherent civilization.
Well, you, as a member of the legislative branch, may feel that way. The executive branch may feel that way. The American people may feel that way, but there are members of the judicial who don't seem to feel that way. And when you have an individual who, speaking another language perhaps, or speaking some English broken or the correct form in various migrant communities that commit fraud, that are here illegally, that violate the rules, that take advantage of local communities, that take advantage of the state, of the federal government, etc., you have judges that swoop in, or state officials like Mary Moriarty, the prosecutor from Minnesota, or Judge James Boasberg in D.C., who come in and say, hold on a second here, I read the Constitution like this, and then forbid the legislature or the executive from doing anything whatsoever. How do we actually solve that? Because it seems like right now we're just smacking up against a wall.
Yeah, you know, you're exactly right. One of the biggest problems in the country right now is judicial tyranny. It's judges who are taking off their robes and acting as if they're political operatives, or if they're active members of the Democrat Party who are there to do the Democrats' bidding. And there are a few different things that we can do to solve that. One of them, which I think is a just and proper remedy, for instance, in this case of Judge Boasberg, for several different things that he's been involved in, is impeachment. So I filed articles of impeachment against Judge Boasberg earlier this year, back in March, whenever he demanded that the president turn a plane full of Tren de Aragua terrorists around midair and deposit the terrorists, illegal aliens, back into American communities. I thought that was clearly an obvious abuse of power, a politicization of his court, a weaponization of his court against the president. But what we've found out since then is that Judge Boasberg has been involved in lots of different things, including the Arctic frost investigation, where he signed off on non-disclosure orders. And we think he was probably involved in far more than just that, but definitely non-disclosure orders demanding that cell carriers not tell sitting U.S. senators that their phone data was being monitored by the federal government. I mean, that is such an egregious abuse of power, a violation of the separation of powers, a violation of a sitting senator's basic right to privacy, and infringes upon their First Amendment rights to be able to speak openly and conduct legislative business without undue influence from politicized courts.
This is one of the things that I wanted to ask you, because the court that the court official who'd recently responded to these allegations from James Boasberg's court said, well, you know, we didn't know what phone numbers they were attached to. We didn't know they were attached to U.S. senators. So we thought, yeah, just give them the subpoena. How were we supposed to know that we were violating a senator's rights? We thought we were violating just some average American's rights. I mean, kind of telling there, isn't it?
It is. It's incredibly warped logic. And you're exactly right. If they're defense is that they were just violating a random United States citizens' rights. That is a problem. But really, the question is, if at best the judge didn't know what was going on, he didn't know whose data was being monitored, and I think that is a dereliction of duty to figure out what non-disclosure orders he's signing off on or subpoenas he's signing off on and who they relate to. That's a basic piece of information you would expect a judge to understand before signing that document. But I think I'm very skeptical that they were just simply unaware of the people that they were signing these orders related to. I don't buy that. I think that is a defense that they're trying to run to in order to cover themselves. But I don't think it's a very good one.
Just last thought here. Do you actually think that you'll be able to get some of these individuals before committee to answer on some of these questions? I mean, you certainly had no problem putting the NPR CEO up against the wall on statements that she very publicly made and then tried to deny it having any knowledge of.
You know, I'm certainly hopeful, and I've been pushing for that, not only for impeachment, but, you know, to get to impeachment, we need to have an investigation, and both the House and the Senate are doing that right now. And I would love to bring not only the judge, but various other people involved in the Arctic Frost investigation before us to answer for what they were doing, weaponizing the federal government against their political enemies, conservatives. I mean, really every major conservative organization, multiple sitting senators, pundits across the conservative spectrum who were being targeted in this investigation. They need to answer for that. And I think we would learn a lot by having them under oath with cameras on and giving us the ability to ask them questions. I think that'd be incredibly valuable. It'd be enlightening for the American people. So I would love to do that and have been pushing to.
Well, if anything, having some of those clips would be valuable for the show. Our audience quite enjoyed the NPR clips. Representative Brandon Gill, great to have you. Thank you very much for what you're doing, and keep it up.
Thanks for having me.
Now, let me tell you a little bit about what Judge James Boasberg has been up to today to warrant such further shenanigans. Well, he has decided to make one of the weirdest legal arguments I think I've ever seen. Quote, the court accordingly orders that Kristi Noem and the Department of Homeland Security, the plaintiffs, shall attempt to secure the presence of Erez Weveni for testimony on the 15th. The government shall produce Drew Ensign for testimony on December 16th. So, the plaintiffs are the ACLU, and the government, obviously, Kristi Noem and the Department of Homeland Security, is supposed to produce another. Here's the issue with him just getting out here and saying that you shall attempt to secure these people for testimony. Boasberg is threatening Kristi Noem, the head of the Department of Homeland Security, that if Department of Justice whistleblower Erez Weveni and Deputy Assistant Attorney General Drew Ensign are not brought before his court over deporting people with the Alien Enemies Act deportations, then he will hold Kristi Noem in contempt. You say, Tony, why does that matter? What's the big deal? He just wants people to come testify. The Supreme Court's already ruled on this case. The Supreme Court of the United States has already ruled 6-3 that the President of the United States is within his constitutional right to uphold the Alien Enemies Act. If someone is coming to the United States from a designated terror organization or a suspected government who is sending people into the country to act against the will of the United States. If the president wants to deport people who are Chinese nationals, he can do it. He wants to deport people who are Venezuelan nationals, he can do it. He wants to deport people who are Eritrean nationals, he can do it. Pakistani nationals, well, it depends, because Pakistan is an intelligence sharer with the United States. It matters because the Alien Enemies Act makes it clear who is sending the person is important. Boasberg has no say in the matter. He can kick, he can scream, he can say, I'm going to hold you in contempt. No, this is a direct judicial overreach. Forget all of the politics for a second. The matter has been settled. If my boss says, Tony, there is an ad that you really want to read on the show, and I have decided no, and then I get out here and I start doing the ad anyway, I am not only violating the chain of command, I am being insubordinate to the contract I signed to work at the Daily Signal. And in the same way, James Boasberg agreed to uphold the U.S. Constitution, and that means, bowing to the constitutional rulings of the Supreme Court of the United States. It's signed, sealed, delivered, baby. I don't know what to tell you here. Neither does James Boasberg. That's why he's fighting so hard to stay out of any committee which is trying to drag him before Congress to explain his actions. But of course, you won't see Stacey Abrams saying anything about that. Nor would you hear anything from people like Ilhan Omar and the rest of the Somali pro community over in Minnesota, where things are just getting really, really bad. We're going to talk about that. More news coming in just a minute. Don't go anywhere. Got to bring the radio crew back from commercial. It's the Tony Kinnett Cast.
This is the Tony Kinnett Cast on 93 WIBC.
Well, I thought on Friday when we told you that the $1 billion in fraud in Minnesota becoming possibly $8 to $10 billion in fraud was a bit of a problem. That maybe Americans would have looked at that and said, wow, I'm really angry that children with special needs, the ones that we're claiming are so important right now because the president of the United States called Tim Walz, quote, seriously retarded, end quote, that those children who didn't receive food because the Somali community, over 70 representatives of the Somali community leaders, business leaders, entrepreneurs, owners of restaurants, stole that money, Americans would be really mad. Like bipartisanly mad. That's outrageous. It's terrible. It's awful. It's evil. No. Instead, what we are currently witnessing is one of the most bizarre forms of political suicide I've seen since, it's been a few minutes since Jasmine Crockett announced herself for the U.S. Senate. So the lieutenant governor of Minnesota, whose name is Peggy Flanagan. Now, if you've never heard of Peggy Flanagan before, allow me to give you a brief introduction. On her profile account, she says, Mom, organizer, Lieutenant Governor of Minnesota. All right, cool, fine, no problem. Then, because she's a white girl in the Midwest, she has to break out the Native American simping. Now, as a legal member of the Cherokee tribe in the United States, with my little BIA card, I love it when white women do this because it's always so over the top and awkward in a way that real people who have Native American heritage never are. She says, my Ojibwe name is... Oh, I can't read that, Nick. It looks Polish. Or as she translates from her Native American gibberish for dummies, speaks in a loud and clear voice woman. So in the dances...
Flanagan, the strong Ojibwe tribe name.
Yes. Very, very strong, very, very stunning, very, very brave. Going to the Kevin Costner Dances with Wolves school of languages, Tatanka. Let's dig into what she did here. She says, this weekend, I joined the Somali community in Wilmar for lunch at the Somali Star restaurant. Producer Nick, let's play the video first, then you can tell me about the Somali Star restaurant. It seems like a name I should recognize.
Hey, Minnesota, Peggy Flanagan here. I'm coming to you from downtown Wilmer, where we just had lunch with the Somali community. We're going to show up for our neighbors. That's who we are, and that's what we do.
Show up for our neighbors at the Somali Star restaurant. Producer Nick, would you tell me a little bit what's going on here?
First off, what's up with all these Minnesotan politicians eating this food? But at least Fry had the goal to eat on camera. All we saw was her grabbing a doggy bag.
Well, I mean, to be fair to Jacob Frey of Minneapolis, that man was struggling through eating those beans with his hands. I think
we'll get to it. I have an anecdote for you. So I did some research into Somali-owned restaurants because they're connected to the Feeding Our Future fraud, which is really the one directly. That we're discussing. Yes. Considering that Ilhan Omar hosted a lot of parties at a certain restaurant, specifically in the Minneapolis area. Speaking of the Minneapolis area, that's where 90% of the restaurants owned by Somalis are located. The rest are dispersed throughout the rest of the state. Specifically, she went to Wilmar, which has approximately 6, based on some Google reviews.
So to
Six
stand
Somali
with
restaurants.
so to stand on the community, she goes to Wilmar, where there are 6 different Somali restaurants, Somali-owned
about 2
restaurants.
hours away from Minneapolis.
2 hours away from Minneapolis. She goes to this place with 6 different restaurants she could choose from. Okay.
Yeah,
okay.
and interestingly about this restaurant is it is called the Somali Star.
Okay.
Which is located right next door to this other Somali-owned restaurant named Fafan.
Wait a minute. You're telling me the lieutenant governor of Minnesota went to the restaurant right next door to one of the core fraud ring restaurants in the Somali community?
So Fafan is one of the restaurants directly connected to the Feeding Our Future NGO, which claimed to have served 1.6 million, of which they served none, allowing them to steal over $5.3 million at that location, to which the owner has now pled guilty and is a part of the prosecuted group of the 72 to 75-ish restaurant owners.
Dude, that's wild. It's wild. It's not just limited to those restaurants. We also have clips. All of the old, white, bitter, liberal women in Minnesota are going to Somali restaurants.
Something happened in our community today. It started with an invitation for a few friends to join me for lunch to support our Somali community, support our businesses, and
so when we looked through the video footage there, what we saw, and we don't have time to go through it frame by frame like we usually do, everyone is using the utensils differently and appears to be confused, which means none of these people have ever eaten there before. So just like liberal white women, they don't actually care about
the virtue signaling.
Brown people, the broad brush that means nothing at all, that they claim so much to love. They've never eaten there. They've never supported it before. They went there and ordered the cheapest item on the menu. There's a report today that people ordered like appetizers or palate cleansing dishes as opposed to like a meal, which is freaking hilarious. It's like going into Taco Bell and be like, a stack of your finest napkins, Wilmer. Like, excellent. Excellent. Ilhan Omar, though, she's the most just depressed out of everyone. She goes on Face the Nation over the weekend with Margaret Brennan. And of course, all of this conversation about, when you took a lot of photos with these fraudsters. You campaigned at their restaurants. Gee whiz, that's a lot of suspicious stuff, Ilhan Omar. And she's, of course, making the case that it's not the people of Minnesota or the people of the United States who were defrauded of $8 billion. But really, it's the Somali community that's really hurting in this one.
Of the 87 people charged, all but 8 are of Somali descent. And that has added to the spotlight being put specifically on your community. Why do you think this fraud was allowed to get so widespread?
Well, I want to say, this also has an impact on Somalis because we are also taxpayers in Minnesota.
I love that so much. Somalis pay, in total, $67 million a year in taxes. The amount of fraud that was perpetuated by 70 some members of the Somali community was $1 to $8 billion confirmed so far. We pay taxes. Ah, yes. Well, I shot him, but I also tipped him on the way out, officer.
I'm not very good at math, but that doesn't really add up for doing. They didn't even do tax on their fraud.
Oh, no, it adds up. Just not for you, but for Al-Shabaab, the terror network in Somalia.
We also could have benefited from the program and the money that was stolen.
We also could have taken more government benefits, is a great argument to make. The Somali people pay taxes, but also, yeah, sure, you were defrauded of $8 billion, but also we should have been getting more money from the state.
You should be grateful we didn't steal more of your money.
So it's been really frustrating for people to not acknowledge the fact that we're also as Minnesotans, as taxpayers, really upset and angry about the fraud that has occurred.
So that's why you see all these rallies demanding that those people be thrown up and locked away and, moved back. Because again, if you have a group of people who migrated to your country and they, together, there is someone in your community that pulls a Benedict Arnold kind of a move, betrays everybody, makes you look bad, then wouldn't you say, yeah, deport him. We'll find him for you and everyone who was involved with this so you can deport them because we're real Americans. We moved here to be American. No, they're never going to say that and they never will. Radio crew, we're going to send you to the commercial. We have more to cover here on more of the victimization and, of course, more news because, God forbid it slows down. It's the Tony Kinnett Cast here on the Daily Signal. I saw a comment during the Brandon Gill interview that said Tony makes some really good points between the radio intro announcements. So very good point. Right now, what we try to do, because we have such a broad network, we're on radio, we're on TV, we're of course on our live streaming software, people watching the podcasts, listening to the podcasts as well. So we're just trying to make this as easy as it is for everybody. Sorry if the intros and the outros, are a little much for you. We're trying to make that as least burdensome as possible. Not least burdensome as possible, because I'm very, very good at segues, is a particular video that has gone viral over the weekend. And it is a video of a lady working at a Cinnabon whose name is Crystal Therese Wiley. And reportedly, as this was reported, there was a Somali couple that went in and she started screaming the N-word at them and making fun of this woman's hijab. And it just became a big mess. Here you go. Here's this particular video.
That's I am racist.
Mm-hmm.
And you are an
You are an idiot. No,
I
I'm
am
not.
racist, and I'll say that to the whole entire world. Don't be disrespectful.
You ruined your life, by the way.
Oh, you talking about respect? You talking about respect? You are fired
Just
from
flipping
this
them off.
place, motherfucker. You're not gonna be working here.
Suck it.
Suck what? Look how you
Suck
fucking look
it.
like.
What's wrong with you?
What the is wrong with you, you fucking ugly Get the out of
Ugly?
my face.
Talking about ugliness?
Did I
Okay, so this video launched 1,000 tweets in anger because the left immediately took this and said, see, look at these Republican MAGA white people who all hate black. This isn't about Somali migrant crime. This is about hating black people. Look, they're using the N-word. It's really terrible. And then there was another clip that unearthed from a few seconds before that seemed to show that the Somali couple, may have been sexually harassing the Cinnabon worker by getting out there and saying, well, just a little saying that she looks slutty without wearing a hijab. Here's that.
Sexualizing your body makes you a better person.
Are you recording?
I'm gonna record you. Yes.
Do you want me to throw water on you?
Okay.
So what wasn't very clear was at the beginning of the clip he said, so sexualizing your body makes you a better person?
It's just weird. So Cinnabon came out and they released a statement and said, we've seen the disturbing video from a Cinnabon bakery in Ashwaubenon, Wisconsin. We don't condone the behavior, et cetera, et cetera. And the person was fired immediately, terminated by the franchise owner. Their actions don't reflect our values or the welcome experience every guest deserves. And both sides of the progressive always online crowd and the conservative always online crowd took this and just ran wild with it. So everyone got out, started issuing different statements and comments. The lady, Crystal Therese Wiley, made just a killing on GoFundMe. Broke $1 million, I think, earlier this evening, if not quite there.
I believe.
Give, send, go instead of GoFundMe. Thanks. And that's where things get a little bit suspicious. And I mean it. Things do, in fact, get a little bit suspicious. And this is why I suggested this morning on the Top News in 10, hey, before you get out there and you decide, I'm going to give this person my money, or, wow, this is terrible, she's the worst person ever, evil, racist, wait for just a second. Because things get a little interesting. We got to get the radio crew out of commercial break one more time. It's the Tony Kinnett Cast here on the Daily Signal.
This is the Tony Kinnett Cast on 93 WIBC.
Welcome back to the Tony Kinnett Cast radio crew. The viral video from Cinnabon in which a lady screams the N-word, get out of my store. The Somali couple was maybe reportedly sexually harassing her, saying, you look really, like slutty without a hijab on, big fricassee. There were a lot of people that came out and said, I'm going to make some social media posts because I know exactly what went on here. And every time we have people who do that, you end up finding out more stuff that, a little suspicious here. So as for the lady that was supposedly according to the left, this MAGA Republican white girl who was calling them the N-word. Well, it turns out, according to some research from a friend of ours, Abby Libby, she had photos up on Facebook promoting her yard in which she has pro-abortion and Biden-Harris signs in the yard, which is a little weird, a little suspicious, a little strange. Also, she was booked in Erie County, Ohio for endangering 3 kids back in 2022. Doesn't seem like a positively wonderful individual, just according to her record. Now, why do I bring this up? Because have there been individuals who are grossly maligned on social media for like undue reasons? Absolutely. But if your immediate response is, oh man, I got to get out and give money. There are suspicions that she might have been working with the couple in order for everyone to get a little slice of the pie here. Here's why I do, in fact, bring this up. We started seeing all of these comments when, information came out that there was a little bit that was suspicious. Accounts started coming out and saying, it doesn't matter, she's white, therefore we're bringing her into the fold because she's white, and that's what matters here. When you look at the origin of a lot of these accounts, they're not even American accounts that are making these claims. The same thing that has been occurring over the last couple of months is continuing, in which individuals from East Asia, the Middle East, etc., get on social media and try to provoke divide in the United States along racial lines. Now, there are people who on the right have made all kinds of hay over this, saying this is a cultural moment. Matt Walsh made a big episode about this today. No, you don't have to do that. You can wait. You can wait. Instead of getting out and making statements, you need to give this person money. No, you don't. You can wait a second and find out more before you do so. Because, there are individuals that really should be donated to, like the family of Irina Zarutska, where there has been yet another stabbing that has occurred on the light rail system in North Carolina, in Charlotte. Those are individuals that do, in fact, need your love and support. A little bit of patience on viral social media videos, especially in the age of AI, where grainy footage like that made at a moment's notice. You got to be careful. Case in point over on the left, there are now people that are recording videos of themselves saying that of the fraud group in Minneapolis, that, yeah, sure, maybe he committed $250 million, $1 billion in fraud, but he's also, producer Nick, a really nice guy.
This week, the Department of Homeland Security's Operation Metro Surge hits the Twin Cities. The agency announcing ICE arrested 12 of the worst. Among them, this man, 46-year-old Abdul Qadir Sharif Abdi, who DHS describes as a current gang member.
How would you describe him?
I would describe Abdi as the friendliest guy that I know. He was very welcoming to me.
Corey says,
oh, yeah, sure, stole all this money from me and the children, but he was nice about it.
So what's interesting about this guy is his crimes in connection to the gang violence that they're referencing for him being described as a gang member happened around the year 2000, a little bit before. But what's interesting about this is one of these things is an empirical
he's not just one of the fraudulent
him.
people. He's an actual former violent gang member.
He's not connected to the fraud. He's connected to a local gang.
So something that you should even it wasn't just he's a financial con man. It's that he was like a gang member. Oh, it was really nice to me. That kind of a thing.
Yeah, and so one of these things, him being described as a gang member, is an empirical fact, while him being the nicest guy ever is a subjective personal opinion.
Yeah, you can be really nice about the multiple felonies, auto theft, receiving stolen property, misdemeanor theft, disorderly conduct, 3 DUIs, probation violations. Of course, he had a lot of triggered deportation proceedings, but Somalia refused repatriation, so he just remained on supervised release. Because that's how the government in Minnesota is like, yeah, sure, you're so awful that we're trying to get you out of the country. The country that you came from won't take you back. So just, wear an ankle monitor, maybe, try not to stab anyone too many times. Excellent. It's so good to see Minnesota doing the same nonsense. It's why I am really frustrated amid all of this bizarro world, horrible behavior, that you have people like Republican Senator John Curtis of Utah saying, I wake up every morning and think, how can I just make my life super all about people immigrating into the United States? John Curtis, Utah, go.
Control anybody but me, right? And the best thing I can do is set my example. And I think all of us need to wake up every morning, look in the mirror and say, what are we doing? What am I doing specifically today to make this country a better country, to make all of our immigrants feel more welcome? That's how.
You should wake up and think, how can I make, ask not what your country can do for you, but what you can do for the immigrants. You could just, once they assimilate into culture, again, I want people to assimilate here in the United States, but Why does your entire day, as again, the idea in the moderate establishment wing of the Republican Party, you need to go out of your way to make it so that the immigrant individual is less likely to assimilate? Like, why? I'm not.
If that's your first thought in the morning, you have a mental health issue.
The virtue signaling. It's just all virtue signaling.
What we've always had. And I think if more of us would do that, it would matter less what individuals said.
Right. But as you know, he's not just an individual. He's the president of the United States calling.
Of course, Dana Bash. Well, Trump's not an individual. He said a mean word. Excellent. Everyone's just acting so well-behaved today. And this brings us over to some of the news from Ilhan Omar, who is now in yet another tizzy with White House Deputy Chief of Staff Stephen Miller. Excellent stuff over here. So Ilhan Omar cannot resist calling anyone at all who says, maybe Somalis shouldn't commit crimes when they get over here to the country. She says, that's just what a Nazi would say.
I want to ask you about something else that the architect of the president's immigration policy, Stephen Miller, said. On Thanksgiving Day, he posted, "No magic transformation occurs when failed states cross borders. At scale, migrants and their descendants recreate the conditions and terrors of their broken homelands." What do you make of this argument?
Before we let her make again, there's no magic that occurs when you emigrate to the country. You need to put work in to assimilate to a culture, any culture. Ask any missionary. They will tell you about this ad nauseum. But radio crew, we got to send you out to the end of the commercial evening. We'll catch you guys tomorrow. We're going to continue on the live stream. It's the Tony Kinnett Cast. So what does Ilhan Omar think here? Does she believe that there's a magical transformation that occurs? Is Stephen Miller wrong saying, hey, just when you snap your fingers, you become a person inside the borders of the United States? That doesn't magically grant you this innate American civic goodness.
Of failure to assimilate and sort of ruining America. How do you understand this?
I mean, when I think about Stephen Miller and his white supremacist rhetoric, it reminds me, it reminds me of the way the Nazis described Jewish people in Germany.
Yeah, remember when the Nazis said, yes, all of these Jews emigrating to Germany, emigrating and coming into Germany, they're not learning how to be. From what I recall, it was that the Jews have been here forever, and that's the issue. Not that people are coming here and not becoming German. She has no understanding of history. She has no understanding of culture. She has no understanding of immigration policy. She has no understanding of anthropology. She married her brother, which is nice.
And, as we know, there have been many immigrants who have tried to come to the United States who've turned back, one of them being Jewish immigrants. We know the way that people were described who were coming from Ireland, Irish immigrants. We know the way in which people were described back then when they were Italian immigrants.
This is the first time that she's ever mentioned the Irish or the Italians, by the way. It's the first time she's ever mentioned Jewish immigrants to the United States. She's never mentioned them before this. In all of her listicle videos where she talks about the people who have built this country, it's always people from Africa and people from one part of the Middle East and people from South America and people from the Pacific Islander nations. It's never people from the United States who've also experienced discrimination here. But hang on a second here. Now there are Italian people, Italian communities in the United States, entire Irish communities in the United States that are grouped in as white people by her. Jewish people grouped in as white by her. Why? Because they came here and they assimilated. They became part of the country. Physically, emotionally, familially, economically. They assimilated to the country. The stupidity that just oozes from her, I feel like it's infectious.
And to me, we're yes, of course, ethnically Somali. We are in this country as Americans. Yeah. We are citizens. We are productive.
Well, no. Again, the issue is that a lot of these Somali individuals aren't citizens. They're here under temporary protected status that began when George H.W. Bush began giving them shelter in the 90s. And a lot of them have, again, removal orders that have carried on through to this very day.
just to your point of the integration process of some races that are now white that didn't used to be, this isn't like a very long-term thing. I think one of the most famous cultural moments or references that are made quite a lot is 12 Angry Men, where the differentiation of races between the jurors in this play is made pretty evident in a play that was released in 1957. So it's a pretty recent development where we look back and don't see Italians as a separate group than the quote white man.
I mean, it's also true. Again, I referenced it on the show a lot. Thomas Sowell's Black Rednecks and White Liberals. He begins the book by describing the weird civil rights movement in Indianapolis, because Indianapolis didn't have the same redlining accusations that a lot of other cities in the South and in kind of the middle industrial West and the Northeast had. In Indianapolis, the primary concern in the 40s and 50s and 60s was not that black people were going to immigrate to Indianapolis. It was that the poorer white people from the South were going to immigrate to Indianapolis. There was a higher priority in the legal standard to have people who they considered culturally inconsistent than those who were of a different color but were culturally synonymous or compliant or compatible with those in the area. That's why some of the black community districts in Indianapolis are less defined by separation and are more defined now as have been a part of Indianapolis proper longer than perhaps in Chicago or St. Louis, where there are more like black communities that are these more like blocks where people stayed in. Cultural assimilation, once again, it matters. Now, I do want to move on to some other stuff. We could talk about more about Stephen Miller. We could talk about J.B. Pritzker letting some illegal immigrants off the hook on a series of crimes regarding what we talked about. I actually want to pivot to some pretty good stuff here. Some really good stuff here. I've been looking forward to this because I have been told everyone was going to be dead by now due to a number of things. And we made the case on the show a couple of months back that when a lot of the tariff questions, when a lot of the international negotiations on trade stuff started to get settled, that the economy was either going to rocket forward because the Supreme Court ruled one way on tariffs, or the economy gets used to the policies that the Trump administration is putting forward. And then once the regulations start to get cut, things are going to rocket forward. And now here, mid Q4, right before Q1, things really do seem to be taking off, which again, as we made the prediction earlier in the show, months and months back, this is why I am a lot more optimistic about the midterms than a lot of Republicans online seem to be. And I've said this before. Now, I do want to...
You'll remember that I'm one of the people that will openly say I'm very pro-tariff.
That's true. Let's hear Kevin Hassett giving some of the details on CNBC about some of the new economic data that I think is really worth playing.
There's a huge amount of positive news that the president is going to be breaking this week about the economy. You know, we've got a person who actually approached the studio with me, walked with me, who's tracking the openings, the groundbreakings for the new factories that are, you know, in the trillions of dollars of announcements that the president's been making. And we're up to almost 30 of those that are actually the groundbreakings have happened. And so there's a lot of positive news that's positive for people's jobs, for people's incomes, and for inflation. And President Trump is just going to go out there and remind people of that. But in the end, again, going back to the eye on the horizon, that President Trump's economic policies were profoundly popular just before COVID in his first term because he had $6,500 of income growth after the big tax cuts. Yep. And so right now we're going into next year where the typical person who's got no tax on tips, no tax on overtime is probably going to see an extra $1,600 to $2,000. A lot of that will come as tax refunds in the beginning of the year. That kind of stuff is going to make it so that people are going to look at their wallets and say, oh, boy, this guy's really making me better off.
This is the big issue for midterms. This is going to be a level of momentum that I'm going to be honest with you right now. You have President Trump coming out and saying that Democrats talking all about affordability. It's a con job, which it is. That is correct. Because when the Democrats get out there and suggest that President Trump doesn't care about affordability like we do, it's a lot like Ilhan Omar accusing people of not contributing to their local community. The insult doesn't work. I'm afraid not, Chief. You don't get to play that game when you have done quite the opposite. But besides that, the president does need to deliver on the economy. And having Treasury yields increase, we'll talk in a second about some of the fuel situation. We'll talk about the interest rates. Most importantly, when the big, beautiful bill goes into effect on your taxes, when you see yourself paying less in taxes than you did last year, that's going to make a huge difference to the economy, not just in the residential. That is going to be a massive boost to the corporate market. That is just a fact. It is. There's no way to illustrate that otherwise. The question was going to be, is the president going to have to contend with this major AI bubble burst that's going to cripple the tech economy? And I remember saying, I don't really see this bursting because not everyone is relying on AI. Not everyone thinks it's a gold mine. Most Americans think AI is something that's okay, but also really annoying. And so when they see, oh, wow, AI stuff is going down, no one is like, oh, I really wish there was an AI assistant instead of a real person to help me on the other end of this communications call. No, I don't see that. Now, the core achievement of the Trump administration, the thing that made me put on the red hat last week, to this day, the CAFE standards from Biden that he struck down, opened up auto manufacturing in the United States. Whatever kind of car you want to build her, you can build her. You want a weird little tiny car that can fit in your pocket? Build it. You want a really awesome Toyota Hilux that for some reason we only sold to the terrorists? Now you can have them here. No chicken tax. You want to screw over all of those Obama era regulations that made the trucks that you bought more expensive because of the fuel economy? Get them out of here. You're fired. That's the stuff that Americans voted for. And when you lower the cost of fuel, it lowers the cost of everything. The cost of transportation decreases, which means that's not something that we have to take out of the good final service cost increasing as much. And of all of the people who a lot of Americans trust when it comes to a general idea on the economy, it's Dave Ramsey. Dave Ramsey, who's going to tell you to eat rice and beans, not with your hands. Who's going to get out there and be really disappointed that you decided to finance that burrito. I will tell you, Dave Ramsey, being the optimist on the economy, he doesn't get out there and just grant sunshine and smiles.
This does not happen.
It does not happen. Dave Ramsey smiling is like Ben Shapiro talking slowly. You can measure those in terms of how many solar eclipses have occurred. That's a different. Here you go.
Interest rates are down, and gas prices are down below $3 in most places. And the economy seems to be, the people we're talking to are really not having huge, serious affordability problems. There's a lot of talking heads, a lot of squawking about that, but most of that's political.
I love how skeptical he is.
He is. I mean,
It's the sign of a wise man.
It is. You don't want to over-promise and under-deliver. Now, the Trump administration has promised delivery. And what's really funny is that the big gotcha from over the weekend, I don't have the clip ready to go right now, a lot of clips to get ready today. Scott Bessent was asked, well, did Donald Trump lie when he said that girls were only going to have $2 for Christmas? Because Scott Bessent was praising, a lot of people are buying things for holidays this year. The consumer interest in the market,
cost of Chinese goods,
is doing pretty well there. And Bessent said, she's like, well, was the president wrong when he said things were going to be terrible? Was the president wrong when he said temper your expectations? And Scott looked at her like she was Tim Walz. You know what I'm saying? Looked at her like her mother had been taking too much Tylenol. You know what I'm saying? And it just was a real treat to watch. Again, when you get out there and say, it might be a lighter Christmas and it's a good Christmas, then you're happy, you're pleasantly surprised. When you get out there and say, oh, Mr. President, after that's translated to everything's going to be amazing and it's not, you're disappointed. It's a key factor. That is why I have said that for the 2026 midterms, the economy will likely end up carrying itself forward. Now, you still have Q2, Q3 to contend with in an election cycle, and Republicans could snatch any kind of a defeat out of the jaws of victory. We'll get to that when we get there. I've got some more great news for you. Gas prices are actually down, as I've already said, but here you go. We'll throw that up.
$2 a gallon in June of 2022. That, of course, in the Biden administration. $2.95 now. Investors are waiting.
Gas prices down, oil prices down. That helps us on the international stage. Production going up as well. Here's the other excellent piece of data that you really haven't heard about yet. The number of active nuclear power plants is increasing. The amount of power
I know you know how excited I am for this. The amount of nuclear energy, or the amount of electrical energy that those nuclear power plants are allowed to produce, is good. 3 Mile Island has a unit that is coming back online here in the next couple of years. There are nuclear power plants that are being planned, constructed, and prepared for those reactors to come online in 13 additional states, according to the U.S. Department of Energy. For the first time since, the Biden administration, we are now starting to see generation peaks in electrical energy. You say, Tony, why is that a good thing? Because energy that powers the grid of the United States makes me a lot less worried about certain kinds of energy needing to go to power generation and can then go to civilian product consumption. I don't have to worry about the petroleum industry contributing to the American electrical grid because it can then go to something else. The nuclear grid will take care of it. Additionally, that is a stable kind of power. It's not reliant on the weather. It's infinitely more difficult for China to screw with. It's very, very safe. And when it comes to boiling water, which other than one type of energy is how all of our electricity is made, it is the best for the environment and water impact. That's right. It is far less likely, and by the way, far less radioactive than the coal power plants, which are more radioactive, but still contained, and it's not unhealthy. But it is a very the environmental impact is so minute.
Sorry, we have two former science majors here talking about that specifically, but that is a very good thing. Yeah, there's some good news, believe it or not. There are some things to be optimistic about in the energy economy. And also, amid all of the annoyance and frustration with the Attorney General's office and the Department of Justice, with Pam Bondi or Kash Patel, there is one member of the Department of Justice who has not for a second disappointed. And I am talking about, of course, Dan Bongino. But other than Dan Bongino, Assistant Attorney General Harmeet Dillon is a powerhouse. That woman has never stopped once. She is a queen. I am a very big stan of Harmeet Dillon ever since back in my education days when she was covering the chalkboard review stuff that we were doing. So she's not only a friend and a friend of the show, she, as the civil rights director for the Department of Justice, has announced that the Department of Justice is forming a Second Amendment right protection wing. It has a First Amendment right protection wing. It has a civil rights protection wing. It's time to protect the Second Amendment of the United States. Let's freaking go.
Hi, I'm Harmeet Dillon, the Assistant Attorney General for Civil Rights, with an important update about our work here in the department. This month, the Civil Rights Division has started a Second Amendment section, and I'm really excited about this. For the first time, the DOJ Civil Rights Division and the DOJ at large will be protecting and advancing our citizens' right to bear arms as part of our civil rights work. As Attorney General Pam Bondi has said, the Second Amendment is not a second-class right, and I couldn't agree more with my boss.
Now, we'll get to some of those announcements here in just a bit. We have some other stuff to talk about. I do want to talk about two questions that were just thrown in that are a very, very good for regarding the nuclear energy thing. So one comment from, I didn't have it right up here. Let me find the comment. A lot of comments tonight. Sorry, I'm having trouble. The comment, I can't remember the individual's name. Sorry. From Golden Mare. Said, well, what about disposing of nuclear waste? That's bad for the environment. Nuclear facilities do not produce Simpson's green goo. That's not a thing. It's not dumped into lakes or the environment. That's not how that works. Number two, nuclear power plants, even the biggest ones on planet Earth, produce a very minute amount of radioactive material per year. Like the largest nuclear plant on Earth produces less than a 6-pack cola can of radioactive waste every year. That same radioactive waste can then be repurposed into a different kind of nuclear reactor. If you took Lucas Oil Stadium in Indianapolis and you used that as a lead-lined containment facility for nuclear waste, if the entire planet was powered by twice the electric rate by nuclear power right now, it would take 3,000 years to fill up that stadium with radioactive waste. That's not at all a concern. So that's one thing. And number two, the other reason that nuclear power expansion is good, I have no problem with data centers and electronic manufacturing and facilities in the country if they are responsible with water and they are responsible with power. If AI data centers want to build their own cogeneration microreactor nuclear power plants to provide enough power for their data center and then spill over into the community, I am all kinds of here for that. 100%. That makes sense to everyone who thinks economically. You provide more power than you take in as a plant? Absolutely, build the data center.
Yeah, the concern with the data centers is the loss of water in the local environment due to the water being used to cool the actual computers running the AI, and then that being turned into steam, and then sapping that from the local environment.
I will give one little extra piece here. So this is from Cliff Victoria. She says, Tony, any amount of radioactive waste needs to be disposed of well. More reactors equal more waste. Okay, if you filled the country with nuclear reactors, it would still be a pitifully small amount of radioactive waste that we could not fill up our current containment facilities that we built. We have never spilled any radioactive waste in this country, ever. We have never released radioactive waste of any kind. And by the way, if there were some reason in which we had to, yeah, you could launch it into space and no one would ever see it again. No, I mean, again,
launch it at your enemies at a very fast rate.
There's literally so little. The Generation X and the boomers were so lied to by the peace-loving environmentalist, goober, peaceniks, hippies of the 60s, 70s, and then into the 80s when they became professors in the 90s. Radioactive waste does not work like you have been told that it works. The same person who told you that communism's totally going to work this time from California does not get to tell you how the same person who tells you that the earth is totally going to warm up and then the polar bears were all going to die and that didn't happen, those are the same people who told you that radioactive waste is green goo, that Smithers, construct more radioactive green goo. Oh, well, Mr. Burns, are you sure you want to do that and kill all the children? No, you fool. I'll kill everyone. No, that's not how it works.
Yeah, the same politicians that are telling you that green energy is the future, that are then pocketing money from green energy PACs, aren't the most trustworthy when it comes to them telling you the truth about other forms of energy.
Now, as our audience knows, I'm very, very harsh against data centers, AI data centers. I'm like one of the only conservatives out there that I know of on broadcast level that is very, very, very harsh to them. I am all for data centers along major bodies of water so that, again, through the cooling process, they're not taking too much water out of the local water table. If that all evaporates, which, again, according to a lot of AI data centers, they end up returning the water to the environment. But I'm for policies like, hey, you need to put out more power than you take in for this data center. I think that's good. It's up for conversation and discussion. That said, one last absolutely excellent thing from today. The President of the United States, in the midst of announcing economic aid available to U.S. farmers, which again, subsidizing industries, given that it is a national security issue and we're in the middle of arm wrestling with China and other major international powers over how we organize our farmland and what it's for in the United States, the President announced that he would be encouraging right to repair legislation in the United States, which means if you own a John Deere piece of equipment, you don't have to go to the John Deere dealership and pay an arm, a leg, your first child, your third cousin's kidney, and half of your property to John Deere in order to repair your piece of farm equipment. Here was the President on that today.
Because of the tariffs, this is possible. The other thing I'd like to add before going to Scott, and I think it's very important, we're going to also give the tractor companies, John Deere and all of the companies that make the equipment, we're going to take off a lot of the environmental restrictions that they have on machinery. It's ridiculous. I know because I buy a lot of that machinery for different things. We have a lot of big clubs with, hundreds, thousands of acres.
By the way, now I'm expecting Trump, as he drove the garbage truck, he now needs to get in a combine. President Trump in a combine. That's how he shows up at the 2026 midterm Republican convention. What do you think?
From garbage truck to McDonald's drive-thru to combine, I think it's just the natural evolution of the working man.
It really is. I like it.
And I buy a lot of stuff, and you buy it, it's got so much equipment on it for the environmental, it doesn't do anything, except it makes the equipment much more expensive and much more complicated to work, and it's not as good as the old days. And we're going to take a lot of that nonsense off of the equipment, which is going to reduce, and we're going to do it, and we're going to say you're going to reduce the prices. We're not going to do it and they're not going to reduce. They're going to have to reduce their prices because farming equipment has gotten too expensive. And a lot of the reason is because they put these environmental excesses on the equipment, which don't do a damn thing except make it complicated, make it impractical. And you really have to be, in many cases, you need about 185 IQ to turn on a lawnmower now. So we're going to take that off, that crap off that they put on Biden mostly.
By the way, if this means that jerry cans are going to go back to being just simple pour, gas cans, instead of that weird clamp spout, spring-loaded disaster that would give the calmest person in the world stage 3 anxiety and a hernia, that'd be excellent.
Which the purpose of that was to reduce the amount of gas that was lost due to the evaporation, the loose lids allowing the gas to evaporate over time, which is such a stupid design because every time you spill like 5 cups of gas all over your actual engine, evaporating more gas into the air.
By the way, while the president's at it, he also needs to make it illegal for seed companies to require any farmers to turn over any remaining seed at the end of the year. I don't know if you knew that if you're a farmer and you try to keep your bag of Asgrow seeds, I'm just naming Asgrow as a company. I don't know if Asgrow does this. I'm just picking a random company because Asgrow commercials were on when I was a kid and I can still hear beans, 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 beans in my head. Sorry, that legal disclaimer aside. If you have a bag of Asgrow beans and you don't use all of the Asgrow beans to plant soybeans this year, if you have a contract with a seed provider, they force you to return every single seed, or you can get sued for your entire farm. That's wrong. I'm sorry. That's just wrong. That is the HOA. Like, well, it's in your contract. Okay, those kind of ridiculous and stupid contracts, I don't think that kind of stuff should be legally binding. That's silly. It's silly. If a farmer has leftover seed that they paid for, then they can keep the seed and use it next year. What's the problem? Well, the problem is that when you have companies that are receiving subsidies, and these companies receive subsidies, here's the issue. When you have an organization like John Deere, when you have a company like the many seed providers that there are, and they receive subsidization, there should be an expectation, if you're receiving government money, that you treat your American citizen customers well. I have an issue with that. Now, if you want to get out there and you have your own seed company, you take no money from the government at all, and you want to be stupid, fine. But if you take a single dollar from the federal government, you don't get to do that crap. No. And the same in any sector, by the way. If Samsung is getting tax write-offs or Apple is getting tax write-offs, there should be right to repair for Apple and Samsung owners. This isn't difficult. There should be pros and cons to taking government money. This has always bothered me. If you are going to take money from the federal government in the form of a tax write-off or in the form of an investment, then your policies should have to be more accessible to the average American. There shouldn't be gatekeeping nonsense and extra clauses and silliness to keep your company afloat. After all, you're taking government money. So, those things aside and said, I think that we've got about everything taken care of tonight. Wouldn't you say? Good times, good fun for all?
Yeah, I really like ending the episode on 3 or 4 points of huge wins.
Again, I'll take
the week off
negative
right.
news all the time. We'll start the week off with a little bit of excellent news on that side. We'll see you guys tomorrow. Don't go anywhere at 7 p.m. Go somewhere else now because the show's over. It's the Tony Kinnett Cast here on the Daily Signal, nationally syndicated, first on 93 WIBC. Take care.